Through the vast and sweeping changes in consciousness, I think you can feel that. Nobody to tell you better than my beautiful friend from the United Nations Association all these years, Jean Perrano.
So I always say it's easier for me to try and do stand-up comedy than to address a crowd or hang out at a happy hour. Thank you all for coming. I don't know if you heard, Ann Simonton came down with an asthma issue, so she wouldn't be here. Ann Simonton.
She was going to be up.
Yeah. Anybody who goes to the downtown library, she put up a terrific display in the main display case for International Women's Day, plus the 2 flat cases. So it's quite a terrific display on behalf of women in general. So we appreciate that. You know, for me, I remember going, I like telling the stories I remember because they make the most impact in my consciousness. And somewhere around 2003, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom had their national conference in San Francisco. And I always remember somebody saying, and this is to the guys here today, and there weren't that many men there, of course, but someone made the point of saying, and a few good men. So that's, you're in good company with us here today. And a special shout out to Dennis Etler, the president of our local. Dennis spent a lot of time working on the program and the printed material especially. So
Dennis is a mensch.
I am
We need more mensches.
Mazel tov. So, I'm a little scattered here, but I fine-tuned the things I believe in. And I didn't complicate my life right now with too many of them. And so I tell people I believe in science and nature and the Declaration of Human Rights. It's just the greatest document on behalf of humanity ever produced. And the major initiator of that was Eleanor Roosevelt. So, you know, no brief message from me is complete without asking you to renew your membership or join. There's a low income rate, there's a rate for students which is free. And, you know, even if you don't have time to get involved, just knowing our membership can compete with the right-wing groups that don't have any trouble at all getting members. We need your membership, so. All right, so we plan to have a good afternoon.
Yes.
We're expecting about half of Pat Arnold, Linda Arnold should show up and help present some of the awards. So, I don't know.
On behalf of all of us, I would like to appreciate your activism that has been nonstop. You were one of the earliest activists. I first moved here in '05, and you have just been out there on every important social justice issue. So I would like to suggest that we all give Jeannie a standing
Yeah, I'll just go over a little bit of what we have in store for you all. Unfortunately, as Jean mentioned, Anne is not going to be able to give the keynote. she was going to talk about, you know, the status of the women's movement 2020, which would have been great, because if there's anybody in the know, it's Anne, you know. And she's been involved in that for, my God, probably, well, I would say longer than some of you are old, because we're not all that young here, you know, but she's been doing this for, you know, decades, right? But I'm going to put out a request. If anybody is wanting to talk about that issue, you know, the status of the women's movement in 2020, you're welcome to come up here and share your thoughts and ideas, you know. I'm sure there's somebody here who's knowledgeable about the issues and what's going on in this country and the world.
Me too, me too, me too.
Okay, there's no Me Too's here.
We're all Me Too.
Okay, well, if anybody has the, you know, inclination to come up and say a few words, it's an open mic, let's put it that way. Okay, so, yeah, that can happen anytime during, you know, this afternoon, if you like. As things stand then, the way it is, you know, we have the program, but we're not going to necessarily go by, you know, what's shown, you know, because things change. But nonetheless, what I will do in a little while, unless someone else wants to sub for me, I mean, I'm sort of a guy, and this is Women's Day, so I kind of didn't want to be in the limelight, so to speak. But if there's anybody who wants to sub for me, it's fine, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, what I'll do is, remember, I'll introduce the recipients of the Pat Arnold Awards. You know, as I mentioned, this is the first annual award presentation. Hopefully this will become, you know, an ongoing, you know, event around Women's Day. And of course, Pat was the leading light of the UNA for, oh my God, since when? When, the 1980s perhaps? You know, so she was the mainstay, and she recruited a bunch of people to, you know, to assist her over the years. Sort of like a press gang. And I was one of those who she pressed into service, and here I am now.
Linda's here.
Oh, Linda's here, great. Yeah, Linda Arnold, Pat's daughter, is going to help out. So I thought I would introduce the recipients of the Pat Arnold Award and talk a little bit about Pat herself. And it's in this program, which has some brief comments about Pat, and let's see if I can find my glasses here. It's very small print, but I should be able to read it. So I'm just going to introduce the recipients. No, I'm going to give a brief introduction, you know, and then the award presentation will follow after that. But I thought it would be nice if we got to know the recipients and you know, learn a little bit about their history. So I'm just going to read this because it's small print, and maybe some of you haven't gotten around to it. So the 2020 Pat Arnold Awardees, and first off, of course, a little bit about Pat, for those of you who might not know of her work and history. Pat was a force to be reckoned with, an inspirational and tireless social and political activist whose boundless energy made a difference in every community where she lived. In her early years as a young mother in New York City, she worked to improve tenants' rights and labor conditions in Los Angeles, where her family moved in 1960. She started the San Fernando Valley Peace Center. That's a long time ago. Okay, I mean, I was still, you know, just a little kid back then. Okay, let's see there. Okay, I'm just finding my place. Where she helped provide grad counseling during the Vietnam War years and held art auctions to raise money for many events involving peace, civil rights, and social justice. When she and her husband Chuck moved to the Santa Cruz area in 1980 to be closer to their daughter and grandchildren, Pat immediately became involved with the local chapter of WOLF and the NAACP, and later helped found the Santa Cruz County chapter of the United Nations Association. Over the years, Pat served as a mentor to many young social activists, enlisting them in projects that help develop their organizational and leadership skills. And one of those, of course, probably the last person she mentored was our own Drew Glover, who was president of UNA prior to my leadership. And Pat took Drew under her wing and really mentored him, and with amazing results. So that's a little bit about Pat and why we find it so appropriate to have an award in her memory for those who follow in her path and try to seek for a better world for all. So the three recipients for the 2020 Woman of Courage, we have Alicia Kuhl, who many of you know. A little bit more about her in just a moment. And then, of course, our one and only, our own Cappy Israel, of the 2020 Champions of Peace Award. And Pauline Seals, who is our 2020 Woman Activist of the Year.
Green New Deal.
Yes. So let me read a little bit about each and every one of them, and then we'll take a little break and continue on with our soup line. After that, hi Linda. Linda will present the awards, and the awardees will have the opportunity to tell us a little bit about what they're up to. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Okay, so Alicia, stand up please so we can all see you.
Yeah, here, here.
Okay, now Alicia is president of the Santa Cruz chapter of the California Homeless Union and the co-chair of the Santa Cruz Poor People's Campaign. A couple of years ago, Alicia and her family lost their home and began living in an RV. She immediately noticed a change in the way she was treated. She was harassed by neighbors and the police and felt as if she was an undesirable alien. Her experience led her to actively work with other homeless citizens to try and address the issues they face. She began studying and analyzing the problems of homelessness and poverty in our community. As a result, she became a liaison for the Ross camp and began interacting with the city to protect the camp and its residents. After the camp was dismantled, her best friend, Desiree, died in a freak accident because the alternative housing she was promised never materialized. Alicia's experience totally transformed her life. She fast-tracked her education and training. She's training as an attorney to take the bar exam. She received de-escalation training, mobile crisis training, and has received CPR and first aid certificates for the next 2 years. She has been trained to administer the VISPDAT, which is quite a mouthful. That is the Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Test. Whoa. Let's take this here. That is quite a mouthful, but it's a very important means by which people who are in dire circumstances can be counseled to find housing. Let's see here. There's more than that. Okay, that survey is to help homeless people get housing eligibility. Alicia now splits her time between working over the hill for a nonprofit to help the most vulnerable find and keep their housing. And she remains active as president of the Santa Cruz chapter of the California Homeless Union and co-chair of the Santa Cruz Poor People's Campaign. Alicia is truly a woman with the courage of her convictions and an inspiration to all. Okay, let's go on, and I think we all know Cappy Israel. There you are. Come on, stand up so we can all see you. Okay, Cappy has a master's in creative arts and therapy. She is a woman for all seasons. She has taught modern dance to children, has been a yoga instructor, massage therapist, and is a folk dance and folk song aficionado. But she is best known as a stalwart activist and peace advocate. Cappy has been arrested a number of times, including during the free speech movement in Berkeley in 1964, during the fair trade anti-NAFTA WTO protests in Seattle back in 1999, protesting nuclear missile launches at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and protesting dangerous nuclear weapons production. She is a member of WOPE, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and the Raging Grannies. Let's give it up. I know Cappy wants to mention some people that inspired you as well, so you have that opportunity. Okay, finally, not the least, of course, is Pauline Seals. Pauline. Pauline is an organizer for Santa Cruz Climate Action Network and climate educator, so she is our Activist of the Year, Woman Activist of the Year. Pauline is an indefatigable activist in support of environmental and climate change issues. She is a constant presence at all actions that bring to the public's attention the existential threats that climate change entails. Pauline doesn't seek the limelight, but activists like her are what sustains and propels forward popular movements for social, environmental, and political change. She says that she relies on an excellent bunch of activists in the Santa Cruz Climate Action Network planning group and fellow climate teacher Roland Sahir. So give it up for
Will we be hearing from each of them later?
Yes,
Great.
yes.
Thank you.
So I think that's quite a lineup of very deserving people who, we definitely wanted to recognize for their important contributions to our work for social justice. Before I leave the stage here, I thought I would read a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, one which I think is perfectly appropriate for our gathering today. Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home. So close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, she lives in. Back then, of course, the personal pronoun he was used. The neighborhood she lives in.
Thank you.
The school or college she attends.
Yay.
The factory, farm, or office where she works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerned citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world. If those aren't appropriate words, what are? So with that, take a seat and we'll continue with your feasting, and thereafter, in another 10 or 15 minutes, we'll begin with the award presentations.
Okay.
A mini performance, perhaps, of the Raging Grannies. So for your entertainment, the Raging Grannies.
First thing is Jan Harwood wrote a song especially for the UNA. It's to the tune of Three Blind Mice. UNA stands for peace, stands for day. The work depends on the volunteers. We're very proud of you all, my dears. You feed the children and dry their tears. UNA. So you join us. This side will start. Well, first we're going to do it all together, twice. Then this side will start, this side in the middle. Well, I'm not sure, because there's too many words. Everybody doesn't. We'll just do it together. Ready? UNA. UN stands for peace. Stands for peace. Every day. Every day. The work depends on the volunteers. We're very proud of you all, my dears. Feed the children and dry their tears. UNA. Again. UNA. Again. UNA. UNA stands for peace. Stands for peace. The work depends on the volunteers. We're very proud of you all, my dears. You feed the children and dry their tears. UNA. Yes. Thank you, Jan. Jan is doing fine. She's just mellowing.
So, anybody know what CEDAW stands for? CEDAW stands for the Convention to End Acts of Violence Against Women. And nearly every country in the world has ratified it, except the USA. She wrote this back in 2013.
Pathetic.
I just have to tell you, when I was 13 years old, my mom, Bert Taub, who we lost almost 1 year ago, she was 103 years old, an active member in Wilf, and in fact, she marched at the Aldermaston March with a whole lot of great people from all over the world. And who was that English guy? What? Bertram Russell, yes, thank you. So she was there in the Aldermaston March, and when I was about 13 years old, before the Aldermaston March, she said, Phil, if any guy ever comes up to you and wants to do anything that you don't think is kind and good, then all you have to do is one thing. You have a knee, and you have power in your legs. And all you have to do, Phil, and she had never in our lives, because we were kind of peace-loving people, all you have to do is take your knee and right between his legs, and he won't hurt you anymore. Thank you, Bertha Taub, for Self-defense training, my first lesson. And I've never been accosted by a man because I know I have this knee. And the second thing I learned in Michigan was, if anything bothers you, it's called using your voice and scream so fucking loud that no man would want to come near you and touch any part of your body because your voice is that painful.
But maybe your mom's up with Kirk Douglas, she's kissing Kirk Douglas up in heaven right now.
So in this song, it's to the tune of Deep in the Heart of Texas, so we invite you, if you'd like, to clap when we hit that part of the song.
Oh, hear our cry, let's ratify. It's time to vote for CEDAW. The USA is so passé. It's time to vote for CEDAW. The world unites for women's rights. It's time to vote for CEDAW. It still awaits these benighted states. It's time to vote for CEDAW. We like Sudan and old Iran. Why don't we vote for CEDAW? We still make wars like dinosaurs. It's time to vote for CEDAW. While female brains go down the drain. It's time to vote for CEDAW. Girls are sold, we're all on hold. It's time to vote for CEDAW. Our sisters need for us to lead. It's time to vote for CEDAW. Let's rage and roar. Let's wait no more. It's time to vote for CEDAW. RESPECT. This is what it means to me. It's time to vote for CEDAW.
Thank you, Aretha Franklin and Nina Simone. And Paul Robeson.
Yes.
When we get older, losing our minds, many years from now, we'll still be raging in our flowery hats at Democrats and Republicans. Well, there's injustice, where there is greed, where there's waste and war. You better heed us, you will still need us when we're 94. We have seen it all. We've watched dictators rise to power, watched their righteous fall. Fountains of wisdom, hearts full of love, dear old grannies rule. We remember when our country was our pride, our deals for which our foremothers died. We're on the net, our iPhones are hot, grannies know the score. You better heed us, you're gonna need us when we're 94.
And when you go to jail, you get to sing all the songs you ever learned. That's one of the most fun things about getting arrested. You get to sing all the songs.
Little thing I learned at the Romero, actually Danny Sheehan's class about the climate change situation, and I was so surprised, and this is my way of paraphrasing it. We were talking about climate change, and this was like a year ago in the spring, and the point that Danny was making, or that was being made in the classes, was started with the question, what do you think the most important factor is in us meeting the demands of climate change? And so we were in the class and people like me were raising their hands and saying things like getting off of fossil fuels. Anyway, it turns out that the number one most important factor is the education of girls, of young women. And so that's all I know about the current state of the women's movement. I really am no expert in that at all, but I wanted to share that. And if anybody else would like to speak, especially anybody who knows anything much about the women's movement, I would just really appreciate if you would come up and share like I just did.
Do you want to give a little more information about why that is?
I don't really know that much. I'm really telling you that.
You take Paul Hawkins' book on drawdown, how to reverse climate change. You take, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Somebody else. I'm just really trying to encourage people to come up here and talk.
Looking long-term, one of the biggest problems is the world's increasing population, particularly in countries like Africa, poor countries. And educating girls has been proven the number one way to get women to not have as many children. If they're educated, they wait longer, they have fewer children, they take care of them better, they go to school, etc., etc. And one reason to phrase it, it also helps, of course, to have family planning. But simply educating the girls without anything that will upset anybody's religious sensibilities does the job extremely well. Now, in drawdown, that's actually number 6, I think. So there's wind power and waste less food is number 3. Eat less meat is number 4. I got that right, Michelle, or am I slightly off?
What's number
Well, close. Number 1 is about refrigerants, and that's not a big deal here, because when you get rid of your refrigerator, hopefully you don't dump it in the creek. You let the company that brought you a new one take it away, and they have rules about what they do with the stuff that's inside it. But in third world countries, as the climate gets warmer, everybody who can possibly afford it is going to want a refrigerator, and they don't have the rules for dealing properly with the liquids that are inside.
We're getting rid of whatever rules we can. We may not by that time.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline.
Yay! As Eleanor Roosevelt said, everything we do in our individual lives makes a difference every single day. Who we touch, who we talk to, who we show respect to, who we listen to, who we reach out to. Every single day, right now, every minute, makes a difference. Okay, so we're gonna do a little flashback here to early women's movement. Okay, and I just lost this wonderful memory about being a woman, about being a girl. Oh, this is great. It's still with me. It was back in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Well, I'll give you a little example of when I was in college and I wrote a really good paper. It's a personal experience. And I had a really good teacher. He hadn't yet been hired at Harvard, where he became a little more arrogant. But before that, he was at Tufts University. I wrote a really good paper about Piaget and children, intellectual development. And at the end of the paper, he wrote, "Too bad you're not a man, Phyllis. You would have made a good PhD candidate."
Oh my God.
So that was in the late 60s, that was happening.
And it's still happening.
Yes. And it is still happening.
Yeah. Liz Warren said that she was dealing with that in order to become president.
All right, my memory is going to come back to me of this other event in the 60s or the 70s where I kind of woke up to the issue of sexism and my own oppression. So when it comes back, I will come back to the mic. Good.
Well, you know what they say about the 60s.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce Linda Arnold, Pat's daughter. And she would like to say a few words about Pat, so go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful songs that made me think of my mother so much. And thanks everyone for coming today.
She had a good voice.
Yes, she did. And on behalf of myself and my son and our whole family, I want to thank the UNA Santa Cruz chapter for creating these awards. It really means a lot to us. And I know she would be so pleased. And we're deeply touched. This is a wonderful way for her legacy to be honored. So thank you. So those of you who knew her knew that she was a force to be reckoned with. She was not intimidated by anything. And yes, she always made a difference. And she had a very strong moral compass, and it always pointed in the direction of social justice. And I wanted to relate a little story that she told me. When she was about 14 years old, she was at Sarah Lawrence. I'm not to put my fingers in my mouth. Anyway, she was at Sarah Lawrence on the East Coast. Her family had grown up in the Depression, but her father had managed to get her a scholarship to go there for her sister and her. And one day, one of her affluent friends invited her back to their home. And she was admiring a beautiful chess set. And the girl said, "Oh, that! Well, it took a man his whole life to make that." And my mother never forgot that moment. And I never forgot the story. And so as she matured and became the amazing, determined woman that she was, she never accepted that rich and powerful forces, including governments, could get away with playing with the lives of others, playing games with the lives of others. So that, that was just one moment in many that informed her spirit, her determination, and her moral compass. So thank you again for honoring her. It really means a lot to us. And I look forward to hearing from all the other strong women today who are being honored and who are making a difference as well. So thank you. So it's my great honor to begin to introduce and make the awards. So shall we start with the Woman of Courage?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so it's my great honor to award to Alicia Kuhl this award, and to Alicia, whose experience with homelessness not only informed her compassion and her understanding for problems of the community, but it forged a determination to work and advocate and a life passion to build better lives for vulnerable people. So, Alicia, can you come on
Thank you, everyone. I truly feel like this is an honor. I didn't have the opportunity to know Pat, but I do feel like we have a lot in common. I believe housing is a human right. I feel that has been ignored here in our community. And my courage has basically come from anger and hope, both kind of combined. And seeing the way that people are treated here, and the way that I feel that everyone should be treated equally, that we all have the right to have our basic needs met. And when that happens, we can grow. I've seen that happen. that's my hope for this community, is that we get to a place that everyone is housed, they have their basic needs met, and they can begin to just grow and heal, learn who they are, what they like to do, build community. I have hope for that. I know that we can get there. I feel that our city government and people in charge have failed us multiple times.
Really?
I keep fighting towards getting them to realize that there are solutions and please stop avoiding the solutions. I know that there are people in town that don't like me because I have, I am outspoken. I have a tendency to sometimes get angry. I've walked out of meetings. I've said some things that aren't necessarily nice at times, but I don't really make any apologies for that because I feel like it's always been at the right time for the right reason, and I do see through a lot of the BS that's going on and things like that, and
Mother Goose was wrong. It's not about being nice, sugar and spice and everything nice. That was a very sexist Mother Goose rhyme.
Right.
We don't have to be nice, we have to be real, and that's what you are.
Yeah. And so I feel like the important forces are recognizing what's important. And so I don't need to please everyone, I just need to do what's right. I just need to speak on what's right. I feel like we have a moral obligation to do that. And I mean, I don't know how I got that. I mean, it was just kind of ingrained in me. I became active with the Ross camp because my friend was living there. And I became close with our homeless community here. I know a lot of people by name, their story. So I believe in changing the narrative surrounding homelessness. I know that a lot of people in our city like to criminalize and make it seem like they're a bad element that's not deserving of housing and their basic needs being met. And so part of what I work towards is changing the narrative that everyone deserves dignity and respectable housing, not like prison camps. They don't need to be treated differently because they've experienced homelessness. And so those are all the things that I'm fighting for, and I'm going to continue to fight for that here in Santa Cruz with the Poor People's Campaign and with the Homeless Union. And one thing I can say is that this is a national issue too. It's not just here in Santa Cruz.
Yes, big time.
I know that when I call them haters, want to say, just move if you can't afford it. Just move to the next state or go somewhere where you can afford it. I was in DC last June, and there were representatives from all 50 states there experiencing homelessness and poverty. So it's a growing issue. Until we really tackle the root causes and deal with them in a dignified way, it's going to continue to grow, and there is no other place to go. And so, that's my goal is to solve this right here from the ground up and change the narrative about going somewhere else or that people don't deserve housing and human rights, because they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Inspirational. Well, I'd like to present the Women of Peace Award, Champion of Peace, to a woman that I know, and I had the pleasure of having her in my own home and watching her sing next to my mother and seeing her at many, many events, and also have great admiration for Cappy Israel.
Thank you. I had the honor of being with Pat Arnold in the last year or so, doing massages. Here imagine, I just said to massage people, I don't know anybody in their 90s who feels that that's part of their healing process, but Pat was just an unusual, vigorous person, and she did, and so that was really wonderful way to be together. And she lived in a beautiful place too, just, with trees all around. Anyway, I don't feel as much of an effective activist as some of the people here in this room, but one thing I think I like to do is to feel when there's a potential for a critical mass to come together and to be a part of that. We know there's a list of 15 major important #1 issues, all of which are #1. So we can't be doing that all the time, all day, every day, but we can feel when there's a critical mass coming up around something and try to get behind that. And so as an activist, that's what I've always tried to do. Been arrested in Berkeley and in Seattle. In Seattle, there was a boring bus trip between the town and the county jail where they were taking us. There were 70,000 people or so, and they were taking us to jail. And what do you do on a boring bus trip if you're me? You teach a song.
Yeah.
Duh. That's the only thing to do on a boring, silent bus trip. So I taught a song, my favorite activism song, God bless the grass that grows through the cracks. They try and cement over it to try and keep it back. And that's Malvina Reynolds. So I taught that song, and then, okay, that was nice. And then when we got to the jail, police, you could tell the difference between regular police just doing their jobs and police who were really, really, you could really tell the difference. And 3 of those kind came up behind me where I could not see them, pulled my hands back, carried me off to a jail cell, very roughly with my feet barely on the ground, threw me down on the ground. I had bruises all over my forehead. They pulled out big tufts of hair. They pulled my leg way back, and I thought, how did they know that I do teach yoga? And I thought, for another 59-year-old who didn't teach yoga, this might have been kind of dangerous. And it was very scary because one guy had his knee in the middle of my upper back. Very carefully, I think they do these techniques so that they don't leave marks on your body. They know what they're doing to terrorize you without leaving marks. He had his knee on my back such that I could not breathe. I mean, I made a game of it with my lungs. I wanted to pretend to my lungs that they were getting a little bit of air, and I tried to get a little bit of in or out. It was almost impossible to get even the tiniest bit in or out. So they knew what they were doing. It was really scary. And then they all left really fast and threw this big metal door closed. So I couldn't see their faces. In fact, I couldn't even lift my head for about 5 or 10 minutes. It was very traumatic. And then, after about a long time, I don't know how long, and I thought, here I am alone. My family doesn't know where I am. Nobody knows where I am. And then I heard singing 3 cells down. A whole group of people were there, and you have no idea what a difference that made. I thought, oh my God, I'm not alone. So anyway, this is the kind of beginning police state that all those arrests were all about, you know, because in the Constitution it says we don't have a police state, you know, so. Anyway, and then at Livermore I was arrested along with Daryl and Sharon Delgado and Joan McLean, and a lot of people, Joyce McLean, a lot of good people, Alice Davis. Yeah, and then at Vandenberg Air Force Base as well, a lot of us were there. Helen Caldecott was there one year. Bruce Gagnon was there one year, objecting to our sending the missiles that take nuclear weapons. And as Stephen Zunas said, they aren't nuclear weapons, but you can't get anybody pregnant if you don't have a vehicle to get the stuff in there. So they were the vehicle. And we were there protesting the plan. And of course the destruction of people on the islands in the Pacific, whose islands we were destroying. And the boat is going there now, the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule boat is going there now. So anyway, I wanted to mention that arrest experience, because I hadn't heard too many of us, I think, black people and brown people have that experience that I had all the time. But when I watched police treat big groups, they didn't do that to white people. There would be one black person and 20 white people. They would go up to that person and whack with their stick. That's the way it went. So I hadn't heard of too many of us that had been treated in that terrorizing way, so I thought I'd mention it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cappy. Well, it's a big honor to present our award for Activist of the Year to Pauline Seals, and again, somebody who I don't know you, Pauline, but I know that you're doing an amazing job networking and putting out information and maybe behind the scenes being a strong, strong force. So thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Linda and everyone. It's a real privilege to be here, especially to come up behind Cappy, who's been doing this stuff so long, and I'm a newbie on this. But in a way, my heart was always there. At age 17, I was actually suspended from high school for selling peace badges. And in 1965, I started work as a woman engineer in the silicon chip industry. Now let me tell you, every day of going to work was working for women's rights, because there was a fair bit of discrimination, and in those days, harassment, that term, nobody knew that term. You just had to deal with it. People would say, oh, well, if you don't like the heat, get out of the kitchen. Go get yourself another job. Yeah, things like that. So, yeah, got used to that, did okay. But never got into activism until after I retired, finally, from my second career, which was teaching. So, I'm a newbie. We have a wonderful group. Can you stand up here, Susan?
Yeah.
So Susan is representing the planning group of the Santa Cruz Climate Action Network. Janet's also here, and Phyllis has been occasionally to our meeting. So we have every other week planning meetings, and once a month we put on a public meeting at the Live Oak Grange. And everybody's welcome, of course, on a variety of topics related to climate change. Climate change is a focus, but we're certainly very concerned about homeless issues, the current strike on campus, the state of the city council, etc. because it's all a big deal. So we've got a lot of work to do. If you get a chance, check out the table over there. You can sign up for our email list if you're not already on it. Probably a lot of you are already on it. But pick up the food cubes. They're quite informative when you actually pick them up. So thank you all. Keep up the good work.
I just want to say to Pauline, one of the great things about Bernie Sanders is that he has been very clear that climate change is the most important existential threat to the human race right now.
Yes.
And Pauline here in Santa Cruz County, she is our delightful, brilliant, and joyful leader to address the most serious existential threat to planet Earth. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you.
And thank all of our recipients for their amazing work, contributions for social, environmental, and all other forms of justice here in Santa Cruz. And let's give it up again one last time thanks to Linda for presenting the awards and telling us more about her mother. And would you like to say a few words?
Hi, my name is Beverly Deschamps.
Louder.
Closer. Louder? Okay. I'm usually told to shut up. Chill it down. My name is Beverly Deschamps. I'm the president of the Electric Auto Association of the Central Coast, and I wanted to give you a local spin on what's to be done about climate change. The Drawdown book is a great book, and it comes from information internationally. So locally, what I want to say is that the Monterey Bay Community Power, our alternative electricity provider, has done an assessment of emissions, and 82% of our emissions in the 5-county region of Santa Cruz, San Benito, Monterey, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Barbara. Those two last counties have recently joined our Monterey Bay Community Power. In the 5-county region, 82% of our emissions come from vehicles.
Yep.
Vehicles. So that's, and I knew when our city did assessments about 8 years ago or 10 years ago, that came out too. And Sonoma came out at 70% and has gone up since then. And I know a lot of people say, well, what am I to do about it? Well, there's a lot of things to be done about it. And one thing is that there are used, because I know everybody says, I don't have the money to afford a new electric vehicle, but there are used electric vehicles for very, very cheap with very, very low mileage on them. And we do big events around Santa Cruz, so there's lots of places to find out about that. And I know a lot of people here are very good. They walk and they ride their bikes, and I try to when I can, but I'm actually getting over being sick from riding my bike when it's too cold. The other thing that I want to say is, with regard to the assessment by Drawdown, one of the things that causes it to appear skewed in a bit of a way is that all the vehicle designations are all broken up into separate categories. They're not added together. If they were added together, I think they might be second. And the other thing that I want to say is that I go to Africa and I see what's going on with regard to the education of women. And that is, there really are no jobs, number one. Number two, they're being given a European education. They learn French history. They learn about the French Revolution. They're not learning about their own culture, their own religions, their own languages. They're taught French or they're taught English. And it's basically destroying their culture. So there's that to look at. It's not just like, okay, let's just educate women. How are we educating women? or how are they being educated? And it's a great burden on families who have to pay for it. A great burden. They have very little money and they may have to make a choice between having some food or buying the uniform that they have to buy so that their child can go to school. So I just want to say that to consider in the whole big picture of things. So, thank you.
Do you have another speaker?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Not really a speech, I just want to let everybody know that there is a petition for voters in the city of Santa Cruz to have the right to choose whether or not they want to have a 5-story or multi-story parking garage built in the city of Santa Cruz. So this is another serious transportation issue. If we spend money on parking, then there isn't, or also housing, there isn't as much space for housing, and also we need to have more separated bike paths, more public transportation, and that won't happen if we don't start decreasing the number of cars that come into the city. Thank you. So I have a petition, if anybody is a voter in the city of Santa Cruz, then sign it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. How many of us
Hello, my name is Thomas, and I just want to say something about International Women's Day. It's not just for people in female bodies. Freedom and equality for anyone is for all of us.
Woo! Yeah.
Men suffer just as much from chauvinism as women do, in different ways. And true freedom and equality is that. It's equality, and it's freedom for everybody. So it doesn't matter what kind of body you're in.
It does, Brent.
As far as freedom and equality goes, it doesn't matter. We are all equal, but we are different.
Abortion is not your issue.
Yeah, because it takes two to tango.
Right, but we're the ones.
Just be careful, Thomas.
Okay.
We are different.
Of course, that's what I'm saying. We are different, but equal in value. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, we do have this open mic. If anyone else would like to say a few words, and appreciate everyone's input. If not, I'd just like to mention a couple of things. The UN Association of Santa Cruz County, we're an activist organization. We do put on annual events. We have been sponsoring International Women's Day for quite a long time with our soup line, and it's always been very successful, as today's has also been. We also recently have taken up the Hiroshima Nagasaki Day commemoration at the clock tower. Of course, Sherry Conable was one of the leaders in that, and we sort of picked up the torch and we're carrying it forward in her memory as well as the memory of others who have stood for peace and justice, not only here but throughout the world. So we do have, that's our next event. We kind of have quarterly events. So I hope that everyone turns out for that. We've had some pretty successful events over the last few years. We also celebrate Human Rights Day and UN Day. So each quarter we have an event of that sort, which focuses on issues that we all confront. Other than that, I'd also hope that everybody does sign up to become a member of the UNA, as Jean mentioned. Of course, we'd love you to become more active and participate in our monthly meeting and get involved in our activities, but just your support, being a member and receiving information and making a membership fee. That helps our organization sustain itself and puts us in good stead with the regional and national as well. So the more members we have, we do get compensation. We get part of the membership fee comes back to the local. So we would really appreciate that everyone who comes to our events and enjoys them and wants to encourage our work to please join up as a local member. So Tatanka has a few words, and then I think that's kind of it. But do stay and continue enjoying our soups and other treats, and stay and talk and with one another, get to know our recipients a little bit better, and give it over to Tatanka now.
I'll be really brief. All of us in this room know this, but as we get the word out about the UNA, the reason we have the Declaration of Human Rights, thanks to Eleanor Roosevelt's inspiration and to all the leaders of the world who came together and said, how are we going to prevent World War III? That was the origin of it. We need to implement human rights for everyone. So, and then just an idea that we should, I think, consider. If we, in that statement about this all starts local, if we could have something in our city council that says this city believes in human rights, in the Declaration of Human Rights, and if they could have some kind of annual process where they would evaluate everything they do and all the issues, how are we measuring up? Housing is a human right, etc., etc., etc. Culture is a human right. Women have a right not to be violated. It goes on and on. It's our prescription for preventing World War III.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just couldn't help saying that our so-called president just recently signed a decree that we have a sixth part of the military, which is dedicated to war in space.
Wow.
It contravenes all kinds of
international
agreements, and so they should be called illegals for contravening those international laws, which are the highest law of the land.
Excuse me, but before folks do disperse, it's been suggested we take a photo op, so to speak, with all the recipients as well.
And with Linda.
Alicia, Linda.
Yeah.